Hello, my name is Mary Urbis. I'm the gallery director and the exhibition curator for this fantastic show that I'm going to be giving you a gallery tour of. This is called Fire and Smoke, which includes work that is wood, raku, saggar, pit-fired, and alternative-fired clay. I want to give you a quick background on this show before we even go look at these lovelies that these artists from all over the country gave me for this exhibition. I did my first Fire and Smoke show when I was the assistant director and gallery curator over in Valley Art Center in Chagrin Falls, and that was in 2002. And then 10 years later, when I was here at Lakeland, I did another Fire and Smoke raku show in 2012, and then 10 years from that in 2022. So now I've done the third incarnation of Fire and Smoke. I have this affinity to clay, and I just want to show you some of the work from these artists that I found from all over the country. And to give you a real quick background, I got turned on to clay when I was a student at the Institute of Art, and I had the privilege to work with Judith Solomon, and I took a hand building class with her. And when we did that first raku firing, of course we were, kind of in the basement of CIA in the old building. The majors were kind of watching us, but nobody told us to open the vents of the downstairs. So needless to say, we smoked out the basement, and we got teased for that for the longest time. But that moment when the pieces came out of the kiln, and it was with the raku process, they turned red hot, they came out of the kiln, you put them in the sawdust and the paper to catch fire, you squelched it with the trash can lid. Oh my God, then that's what hooked me. And then I had the opportunity to work with Sylvia Ullman at American Crafts, and her strength was ceramics. So I have been immersed and have this affinity to clay artists for decades. There's something to me about the transformation of the materials, the fact that they take powders and water and then they heat them up, and the glazes sometimes become glass, or you get these incredible effects. And the effects that you're going to see on the surfaces of these pieces are going to be exquisite. I think you'll agree with me when you see the show. So I have 46 artists here that are showing 290 artworks. There's a lot of local people. There's some wood kilns that I'm going to be talking about, wood kiln communities, and I have artists, I think, from 8 different states. So thank you for joining me today, and we're going to start this tour with groupings by artists that are participating in the Brinsley Tyrell Institute kiln, which is a wood-fired kiln in Freedom, Ohio, which is near Ravenna. This first grouping of work is from Ryan Thomas Osborne, and Ryan is from North Carolina. I want to give you a real quick background on the method of wood firing. The pots are loaded into the kiln after they've been bisque fired. Sometimes they're glazed, sometimes they're not. As the kiln is fired, the chimney draws flame and ash through the wear chamber, and a dusting of floating ash lands on the pottery. At the highest temperature ranges, this ash melts and interacts with the clay surface, creating the glaze and surface decorations. Flames also pass by the work, leaving its distinctive mark. And like I said, sometimes glazes are used and affected by the addition of natural ash. And the wood firing is quite an involved operation. It takes a village. The artists involved take eight-hour shifts. They stoke the kiln once, every 10 to 15 minutes. It usually lasts sometimes 35 hours or more, and then the kiln cools for 2 days before they actually unload the artwork. So like I said, this is North Carolina artist Ryan Osborne, and he fires with the group out in Freedom, Ohio. And his pieces obviously are a little bit more sculptural. The surfaces are yummy. If you're familiar with my videos, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say, if you can come see the show, I recommend it, because I don't think that these videos can do the pieces justice. Okay, so this grouping on the pedestal from left to right is called Body, then Diving In, and Curious. We've got Hunch, And then this piece in the center here, Flight, this is actually a piece that he recently fired and brought to Brinsley's kiln, and we included in the exhibition. And then this last piece is called Torso. Okay, these next two pieces are by Nicholin Haynes, who fires with the Brinsley Institute. He actually lives outside of Columbus. Nicholin, I apologize, I might destroy the pronunciation of these titles. The one on the left is Polyspicata viscosa, and the one on the right is Minima herba bestia. So I apologize, but if you look at the surface, the drippy surfaces on the left, and then the dark surfaces with the spikes and the little, hand-built pieces. Like I said, the surfaces that these artists create are pretty phenomenal. Okay, this wall installation was created by Teresa Yondo. I need to give a shout out to Teresa right now. She was instrumental in hooking me up with the wood kiln artists at Brinsley Institute and with the Oak Hill Kiln and Peninsula, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Teresa actually, her first degree was from Lakeland. She actually taught ceramics here for years, and I was just grateful that she was able to assist me with some of the contacting of the artists to be part of this show. So this is a wall installation called Evolving Earthly Objects, Lily Pads, Pods, Orbs, and Spheres. And this is multiple kinds of firing techniques. This is actually wood, electric, and gas-fired porcelain and stoneware. And so there's lotus flowers, there's lily pads, and she fired during the raku firing demonstration that we had during the opening reception. So when she does more of her installations, she's actually going to be including pieces that were raku fired also. Okay, these next two are by Billy Ritter, and these are large moon jars. And again, some of these artists create very simple forms because it's all about how the particles land on the pieces, how the glaze fits, and some of these surfaces cannot be duplicated or replicated, and sometimes it's like Christmas when they unload their kilns, because you're never really sure what you're going to get until it's been fired and cools off, and then you open up, you have a kiln reveal. Okay, these pieces are done by Brinsley Tyrell, and he's the guy who has the big wood kiln down in Freedom, Ohio. The piece on the left is called Hungry Virus. Then we have Strange Fruit, Little Bomb, and then on the pedestal is White Virus. In the front is Piercing the Target, and the second one is Jabon-like. Sometimes the artists don't give titles to their pieces, especially clay artists, but I think because these are show pieces, some artists decided to identify their pieces with titles. Okay, this next grouping is created by Fox Nicely. And again, this is, just the simple forms, and he was relying on how the glazing and how the particles kind of descended on the surface. And as you could see, with some of the bottles, they're very similar shapes, but they come out looking different. And that's what's so unusual and unique and kismet and serendipitous about these atmospheric kilns, is you could have 5 or 10 pieces that you think that are glazed exactly the same way, and depending on where they are in the kiln and how they get fired and what the updraft is and all of that, the difference in the coloring could be night and day. As you can see, some of these surfaces are more matte, some of them are a little bit shiny, and then you got this beautiful bottle on the right here that just has all that lovely drippy on it. Sorry, I'm not using all the technical terms, but for me, it's about the surface to the form. It's how the glaze fits to the piece itself, and then the resulting surface treatment and how spectacular that is. Okay, this is Molly Johnson, and the centerpiece is called the ribbon jar, and she's got a mug and a tumbler. And actually on the tumbler on the right, you can see like the crystals that started forming when she fired the piece. And that's kind of like a little gem. And it was fun for me to pick these pieces out because of the reds in them, because I guess I'm so used to seeing the tans and the browns and the yellows and the very earth tones. So I'm a jewel tone girl, so to see reds and even some purples that you saw in Brinsley's pieces are kind of like a bonus for me. This is a new series by Teresa Yondo. These are her orb series. We've got the mother orb on the left, the fallen branch in the center, and elevated orb on the right. What I just want to point out with her work is that she inscribes into the pieces, and then she'll brush or rub in a colorant and wipe it away. And I just want to give her props for this, because in the clay tiles that I created for the raku firing, and she assisted me, helping me do some technical things, I never realized how much time and perfection you needed to do things like this, where you put the different colors into the recesses, almost like you're inking a printing plate, and then you have to wipe all the extraneous color away. So like I said, I have newfound respect for this whole technique of inscribing and then putting the colors in there. Okay, this room is representative of the Oak Hill Kiln, which is in Peninsula, Ohio. We're now looking at the work of Susan Gallagher, and actually some of the pieces in her grouping were fired at Oak Hill, but then she's also done some firing at different kilns. But the one thing I did want to point out about this grouping, besides the fact that she does some absolutely beautiful, exquisite carving, is you'll see the cream and sugar set with the glaze on it, and then just behind it to the right is a carved jar. That is the very same glaze, but the difference is that the cream and sugar was done on porcelain and the piece in the back was done on stoneware. So to give you an idea how the same glaze reacts differently with a different kind of clay, a different colored clay, and you get such a difference in the warmth of the glaze itself. This is a piece by Jack Valentine, who did our raku firing demonstration. I'll be talking a little bit more about Jack's work when we have a whole shelf and a whole vignette of his artwork. Okay, this next pedestal features two artists from the Oak Hill Kiln. The artist on the left, the bottle form and the tea bowls, is Susan Delahanty, and it's actually the Oak Hill Kiln is on her property, and I had the opportunity to go to her kiln when they did the unveiling in the kiln, so I could pick out these pieces. So her pieces is the bottle with the little tea bowls, and then these other kind of organic bowl shapes is an artist named Joe Rustic. And sometimes when I make the labels, I just put things like red, brown, and gray bowl, or small earth tone bowl, which just helps to identify the pieces if you should decide anybody wants to purchase these. And by the time this video comes out, we should be online to take so that people can purchase directly from the website. This is a grouping by Barbara Gideon. These are porcelain leaves that she wood fired, and then the piece underneath it is called Pollinator Bowl with leaves, and it's a bowl that has some leaves that have been glazed in different colors. Okay, this is a grouping of Garden Guardians by Susan Delahanty. We've got Snake and Vine. In the back we have Great Horned Owl, and then the one in the front right is Buzzard Hawk. Okay, this wonderful wall was created by Peter Manders, and these are birdhouse bottles. They're different glazes, and what he's doing with this project is that he's donating all the proceeds. We get our commission, and then the 70% gets broken up between some nonprofits and some groups that he is working with and would like to support. But what I want to point out, and this was just so serendipitous, is look at those shadows. the fact that they look like little birds with beaks, with the way the light's hitting it, it's like, when I came in and my assistants had been installing this, John Sargent and Jeremiah Mrazek, and walked in and saw this wall, it was like, oh my gosh, what a gift. I just think the visual of this wall with all that is just so cool. And as you can see, we've got some red dots. We always like to see red dots. I appreciate that people are supporting the artist, and I'm hoping to have more red dots in the days to come. Okay, this first shelf on the left is a grouping of pieces by Peter Manders that were wood-fired. The beautiful, just again, simple shapes and how the glaze and the surfaces reacted to the atmosphere in the kiln. And then this shelf next to it is actually his daughter Margaret, and these are sweet little pieces, this sweet little teapot and those little slugs and snails, and that little guy in the middle is on the tray with feet is actually a little turtle. And if you guys are paying attention, you know I have an affinity to turtles too. Okay, this is a grouping by Beth Lindenberger, and she's got Shino bowls with the circles, and again, if you look at the two different ones, how the colorings are different. She's got some stoneware pitchers and plates, and again, it's all about the surface, and it's all about how the surface gets flashed, and again, sometimes you try and glaze something with an anticipation of what it will look like when it comes out, and then when it does, it's a bonus. There's a saying where they say the kiln god smiled favorably on you, and I'd say that they smiled favorably on her as well. Okay, these are some sculptural pieces by Benjamin Lambert. Ben actually teaches out in Berea at Baldwin Wallace College, and so we've got this crazy squid serpent kind of figure that was soda fired, which is a little bit different technique. It's adding soda to the wood firing. It's at a point in the firing process, and then he created the hot river trout, and then the fish bottle and the fish vase. And actually, the fish bottle and the fish vase were raku fired. Okay, this next grouping was created by Diane Pinchot, and she is actually a retired teacher from Ursuline College, and she's a sister from the Ursuline Order. And these pieces are pit fired, and then what she did is she went back in and drew on top of them with colored pencils and some underglaze pencils, and then she sealed the pieces with a thin layer of wax. So she has a little bit more of a painterly style on these pieces, as opposed to the artists who are doing glazes and depend on how the atmospheric particles settle on the pieces. So the piece on the left is called Two Otters, Rough Current. The taller piece, which is actually kind of like a big stoppered bottle, is called The Wounded Tree Transformed. And she actually goes into the history of this piece in her artist statement. I do want to encourage people who come to the show. I do have a booklet on the counter that has artist statements if they provided me with one, and she did give an explanation of this piece. And then this other piece on the right is called Two Spirited, and again, it's got a little stopper to it, and the pieces, the little piece on the top comes off. And then we've got three pieces on the shelves. Left to right is Winged One, Reliquary or Crucible, and Grandfather's Wisdom. And the one on the left, the Winged One, you almost miss it. It's actually a little bird, and there's a little triangle of orange under its nose to give you an idea that that's what you're looking at. Because I remember when I first saw this grouping of work, it was just like there was something so beautiful about how quiet and almost sublime this piece was. You might recognize the familiar technique and stylization of Michael W. High. These are raku fired. These are Shards of Our History, Sorceress, and The Offering. Again, the surfaces of these are amazing. The piece in the center, which has a red dot, thank you very much. Just the iridescence of the copper, the metals that are in the clay that came out, and you get that bright, iridescent, like steel blue color, which is fantastic. And then again, the shadow gods kind of smiled favorably on me. If you look at the shadows that were created underneath the shelves, I couldn't have created that if I would have tried. Just the way that they overlap, and see, to me that's a bonus, and it kind of is a cool contrast of the organic shapes of the firing, and then you've got these hard edge shadows that are cast below. Okay, this is Georgia artist Robin Rogers. And we've got his work is all raku. And starting from the left, we've got this is horsehair fired, and this is called Paleo Horse Bowl. And what's different with horsehair pieces is you actually take the piece out when it's red hot, and you actually put horsehair on the piece, and the carbon from the piece transforms onto it. So it gives you a little bit different kind of visual effect. And then I'm sure these next three pieces will be no surprise to people who know me. We've got a sea turtle effigy bowl, because you know I like turtles, honus, the turtles that swim around my beloved islands in Hawaii. We have a barn owl effigy vase, and then we have a sea turtle jar with a little sea turtle guy on the top, and then a crow jar with the crow with a little berry in its mouth. And these are all raku fired. Okay, the next few artists whose work I'm going to be showing you fired in the CIA train kiln, which is in Kirtland, Ohio, which is just nearby here, near Lakeland Community College. And the first artist is Judith Solomon. And as I said in the beginning, I probably would not be standing here if it wasn't for Judith, because I took clay with her, and I got the bug. Honestly, I think if I had it to do over at the Art Institute, I might have gone into clay instead of textiles. So instead, I get to curate wonderful clay shows every 4 years, which is what I've been doing for the last few years here at Lakeland. So we've got two pieces on the wall pieces. They are called Bowl with Dots and Bowl with Blue. And again, look at those wonderful shadows. And some of those little spiky things are just the extension of the acrylic wall plate that I put them up on the wall. And then on the shelf, you'll see pieces that work that is a little bit more indicative of her current work, where it's the hand-built piece that's set into the concrete, and this is called Box in Cement. And Judith is faculty emeritus at the Cleveland Institute of Art. We have quite a few artists here that are teachers and instructors. The next three pieces are pieces by Todd Leach, and you've got a single piece called Best Anagama Single, and then the pair in the front is Best Anagama Set. And the difference in this kind of kiln, an Anagama kiln, is set on the side of a hill, and it's loaded differently. I think it's basically the same firing technique. It just has a couple distinctions, but again, so Todd fires with the CIA people. He fires with other kiln groups around the country, and it really is a community when it comes to these wood-fired groups, because they have to have multiple people doing multiple shifts during hours and hours of firing of the actual pieces. And then the last pedestal we have, these are pieces by Seth Nagelberg, and Seth is the current instructor of ceramics at the Cleveland Institute of Art. Okay, this next group was created by Bill Briard. Bill is also faculty emeritus at the Cleveland Institute of Art. He's got some functional bowl pieces. He's got the mugs on the trays, and actually he created the trays and put the wood together. There's nails in the grouping on the left pieces. He's got a set of 4 bowls in the center that's sold as a set. He's got the machine age platter that's on the wall. But I want to take just a quick second for you to look at his fruit tray still life in clay. He did a beautiful textured tray for these pieces, and then he's got like pears and apples that have the most exquisite surface. Just, oh my gosh, you hear me sometimes, or you'll see me on Facebook talking about how a surface is yummy. These surfaces are absolutely yummy. And again, sometimes you can't reproduce these. It's kind of like, MacArthur's Park. I left the cake out in the rain. I'll never have the recipe again. These artists may never have the opportunity to achieve this. So sometimes when these gems come out of the kiln, they truly are spectacular gems. This last grouping from the CIA train kiln was created by Lynn Lofton, and these are a series of cups that she decorated with some surface design, and then she made the little tray. And they're kind of they're recessed so you can serve them as a tray, but then they also flip over if you wanted to create, use them more as a presentation. Okay, this grouping is created by Carla Guizello. These are raku fired, and she has her studio in Chagrin Falls, Ohio. I did a great studio visit with her, and I just tried to pick out different shapes and different forms. She's starting to do more of the lighter white pieces, and I don't know if they'll come up on the video or not, but again, if you come see them in person, you'll see things like there's imprints of flowers and natural items that she presses into the clay to give them the unusual surfaces. So she's got bottles and an envelope vase, and then she's got that lovely oval covered jar, and then she has those 3 little nuggets that are like mini vases, if you want. And then she also created the square pieces, the square platters on the wall, which are kind of, like a painting done in clay and glazes. And so these are just small square, large square. Okay, this next grouping of work is actually a husband and wife team from Columbus, Ohio. It's Sandra Lang and Walter Weil, and they actually, I kind of interspersed their work together with the bowls and the shapes. And again, they're very simple shapes, but the surfaces are exquisite. Just the way the color pools, or sometimes it runs, or sometimes the glaze will pool into the ridges of the throwing marks. You just never know what you're going to get until you open up the kiln for the reveal. And again, these are very simple, functional shapes, but they help highlight the beautiful surfaces that have been achieved. Okay, these next few artists are artists who work together in the Serafina kiln, which is run by Mike Taylor in Hamilton, Michigan, which is in western Michigan. Mike and I have been friends for years. He's been in multiple clay shows, and I just wanted to invite a different kiln group to this area, because one of my missions as gallery director is to bring artists to the region that nobody will see their work anywhere else. Mike used to do Boston Mills Arts Festival, but that went away with COVID, and who knows if it's going to come back, and who knows if he's going to come back. But anyhow, so the first grouping of pieces is the kind of the orb shape and the 2 wall platters by Jesse Vanderbrand. And again, the platters are just kind of like little paintings, and how he was able to get the different colorants and the different warmth to the tones on the surfaces. And then on the pedestal below, the first 3 pieces on the left is an artist named Adam Batchert. And I just love that yellow surface and the way the glaze pooled on. And again, as you walk through, there's a lot of, wood, in the wood-fired pieces, there's a lot of earth tone pieces, but I just love how the colors broke, and just that kind of yellow ochre makes me think of fall. And then the next grouping is an artist named Steve Peters. The bottle in the back, he impressed some, looks like lace or some other materials into the piece so he could get the texture without actually sitting there engraving it, you know, inch by inch by inch. But then the range of the colors with the cobalt blue with the browns against the tan, I think is quite beautiful. And then he's got these dramatic footed bowls that are on the right of the pedestal. Okay, this pedestal is devoted to Mike Taylor. These are some jar forms. He's got a set of bourbon cups. The tall piece is a large Shino Tsubo shape. Mike is very influenced by Asian art. That's why a lot of his titles will have allusions to you know, or references to shapes that are traditional in Asian ceramics. The set in the front is a Tokuri bottle with one cup, which I imagine is probably for sake. The piece in the back is a Tsubo or Oribe shape, and then he's got the 3 bourbon cups. Okay, these next 3 pieces were created by Santiago Pineda. And these are simple forms, but the way the glaze on it, that piece in the middle, oh my gosh, with the greens on it, I just want to lick it. It's got such a beautiful, sensual surface to it, and it's such a traditional, simple shape, but the way that the glaze pulled, how he got the flashings of red and the green is just exquisite. And the fact that he throws them with a high foot to kind of elevate them, that's something that I really enjoy in his work. Okay, this grouping is created by Montana artist Marcia Seltzer, and this is a technique that she's been working on, which is called Obvara, and these are Obvara orbs. And like I said, it's just how she's able to get the different surfaces on it, and I think the way that she applies whatever pigments and chemicals to it causes it to crawl and pull away, and that's how you get these incredible surfaces. This is a wall platter created by Todd Leach. You saw some of his work before. This is called Medalta Ash. Okay, this next grouping is done by North Carolina artist Scott Stockdale, and these are fired in a raccoon kiln, and then he uses these soluble metal salts that he adds to the surfaces to create these surfaces. He burnishes the surfaces, they've been fired, and then he waxes them and gives them like a patina surface. That's why you're probably seeing like a little glossy surface to them. And again, the surfaces and the layers of the imagery is just exquisite. And with some of these artists, there's such subtlety in the surfaces. I just can't stress enough, if you can get in here and see the work before November 4th, I think it'll be worth your time to see the pieces up close and in personal. So these are pieces from his Celestial series, and then the pieces on the second pedestal is actually a grouping of pieces that are sold together. Okay, this next grouping was created by Carol Green from Illinois. And these are created with mica clay, which is why you see those little sparkles in there. Besides being an accomplished ceramic thrower, she creates the surfaces, the lids are actually etched copper, and then she creates the handles out of bronze. She's got the spaceships, which are the low orbs. She's got the piece in the back, which is a large acorn gourd shape. We have the petite spaceship with a red dot, thank you very much. And then she's got what she calls terra firma gourd on the right. But again, with these, it's the lids that make these pieces that are just so beautiful, and kind of creates a very quiet Zen Asian quality to them. This next group was created by Judith Motzkin from Massachusetts. You might remember her work from the last clay show I did 4 years ago. Again, the surfaces she creates are incredible. These are Sager fired, and what happens with Sager firing is that they're fired in a raku kiln, but then they create like a container that the pieces are put in. Sometimes artists will use foil and they'll place things around the piece and encase them in the foil. There might be chemicals such as rock salt, iron oxides, copper, carbonate, and horsehair. Sometimes there are natural elements to these pieces, and they get wrapped around so that the chemicals react with the, causing them to flash, and then there's different chemical reactions. And again, sometimes they're fired in a kiln, raku kiln, sometimes they're fired in a barrel. And again, so the surfaces are just exquisite. The top piece is called Oyster and Pearl, and the piece in the center is actually called a sounding stone. She's got a sounding stone in the top left piece, the top right piece. She also has a stone in the center, and that's called Deep Pond Bowl. And actually what these sounding stones are, they're rattles. And when you pick them up, although you shouldn't pick them up when you come to the show, when you shake them, you can hear the pieces of clay rattling on the inside. And then these other pieces in the front, the darker pieces, the T-bowl shape, the oval shape, and the vessel is a little bit different coloration, obviously, where it's a little bit more monochromatic and earth tone, but very mysterious, and kind of makes me think of almost like moonscapes or moonlit scapes, how the colorants have been applied and how the effects that she's achieved. Okay, this is another grouping from the CIA train kiln. And these were created by Alberto Veronica. He is actually one of the technical assistants at the Cleveland Institute of Art. But what's crazy about these pieces, this is where technology meets ancient techniques. These were 3D printed, which kind of blew me away when I saw these works. Plus the fact that those little lush blushes of pink and purple were actually absolutely exquisite. But when we get some close-up of the work, you'll see the little ridge marks of the lines of the 3D printing, and it just blew me away that that's where the technology has come now, where you can create the software, create the file, and instead of that plastic stuff, you can put liquid slip, which is liquid clay, into the 3D printer, and it can create these forms, and then he alters them just a little bit so they're all just a little bit different. And then they're glazed similarly, but then you see the subtle differences between each of the pieces. Okay, this next grouping is from Michigan artist Nan Zito. These are pit-fired pieces, and I chose her work just because of the black and the gray and the red surfaces. And here's a little bit of trivia here for those of you guys who follow me on Facebook, how every single morning I say, "Good morning, Nan Zito." This is her work. She shares photos of cats, which I share every day, but she has turned me on to so many different artists. One of them is in this show, but it's amazing the work that she shares. So she's one of the people that I met in the Facebook community. I met her outside of Ann Arbor with Mike Taylor a few weeks ago so that they could drop the work off for the exhibition, and then she drove in for the raku firing and the artist reception last week, which was just so fun. And it was so fun for me to introduce her to all these people who are fans of hers who got a chance to meet her in person. And again, I just love the surfaces with the red, black, and white is one of my favorite color combinations ever. Okay, this is a platter by Todd Leach called Medalta Drilled, and you might notice what looks like impressions of shells. What happens is when they stack the pieces in the kiln to keep them from touching each other and for the sticking together, sometimes they put shells in between the pieces. Sometimes they'll put pieces of clay that they call wadding in them. And again, what's fun about this is the surface, and then he's done all the incising and carving away of the dots, and then look at that great shadow with the light coming through the holes to make white dots on the outside. Again, I couldn't plan this stuff if I tried. Okay, this next grouping of wall pieces, wall masks, and Pope hats was created by Larry Yanez from Arizona. And these are actually faux raku. I was a little naughty here and I included this work because he does raku, but he didn't have access to a raku where he fires in Yuma, Arizona. So he started doing things where he would fire the pieces with low-fired clay, and then he would come back in with India ink to make the dark spots. And actually some raku artists do go back with India ink sometimes to make the pieces pop. So from left to right we have yucca. The one in the second one is serpiente, and it took me a while to realize that was a snake and a serpent with a forked tongue over the Mexican wrestling masks, which I think are kind of crazy. Then you've got this piece with the birds and the wings, which is called Up Pope's Another Juan. Larry is a punster and he likes to have verbal puns. And there are kind of poetry prose that goes with each of these pieces that I've included in the artist statement booklet that you'll find on the counter if you come visit the show in person. We have La Puta Madre. Then we have Nobody's Home with the flames coming out. And the last piece of this grouping is called Lady Liberty. Okay, this grouping is created by Gary DeVoke. Gary has been in pretty much almost all my skull shows, all my clay shows. He's a raku artist who lives down the street from here in Chesterland, and he did the spiky bowl on the left, and then he wrapped it around with this great rusted wire that kind of gives it a kind of a steampunk kind of look to it. And then these are his trademark skull with mohawk lamps. These pieces could be just sculptures. They have holes in the back with inserts for the light, so you get a flashing light. You can also substitute the light for a light that doesn't keep blinking on and off. I just think they're kind of crazy that they blink red. And again, the different colorants that you get with the glazes, the raku glazes that he uses, and then he goes back and he wires the teeth back on, so they're kind of like boingers if you were to touch them, but you're not going to touch them when you see the work. Okay, these first three pieces in the case were actually pit-fired, smoke-fired by Joe Rustic. And then we have three salt-fired pieces that kind of are loosely figurative based by Jenny Mendez. She's a Chesterland artist. And then the pitcher and the two mugs in the back were created by Nicolin Haynes, and you saw some of his sculptures earlier in that first room. Okay, this shelf has been all horsehair fired by Gary DeVoke, and again, it's a similar technique to the raku where you put it in the kiln, you can wait till everything turns red hot, you bring it out, and then before he smokes it or puts it in the can, he lays the horsehair on top of it. And again, it's kind of serendipitous, and it's kind of cool when you watch it if you want to Google it and look at the techniques, because you literally hear the sizzling of I think it's the carbon that gets transferred from the proteins in the hair once it hits the really hot clay, and they just kind of like throw it on the piece or lay it on the piece and you hear that sizzle, which is just really kind of cool. And then he also has a skull lamp and then two horsehair fired jars. Okay, the bottom shelf are two more wood-fired pieces from the Brinsley Tyrell Institute kiln in Freedom, Ohio, near Kent, and these were created by Molly Johnson. And this is Mini Moon Jar 1 and Mini Moon Jar 2. And again, it's some of the surfaces and the melting of the glaze is just, some of it's very subtle and very sublime. Okay, this wall was dedicated to raku artist Jack Valentine, who's from Akron. Jack actually came to the artist reception last week and did a raku firing demonstration outside. He is going to, we actually had a chance to interview him, so we're going to let Jack talk a little bit about his process and his raku process.
Raku, R-A-K-U. It's a Japanese firing process. It's actually originated in, it's a Japanese process from the 1500s. We do what is considered American raku, because in the traditional raku, you just pull the piece out and let it air cool. But what we do is actually put it in a barrel of sawdust, and it causes a real heavy reduction, gives you a lot of coppers and things. Like this is a good example of some of the traditional American raku where you get all the coppers. You know, it just causes the clay body to turn that nice black color. It's a glazing process that's affected by the atmosphere. If you don't put it through the reduction, you won't get the coppers. Like you see the little green tints in here, that would be where it didn't get as much reduction. You know, I started doing this when I was about 15, and you know, once I got into college, I was actually a painter, and I quit painting and just went right into ceramics. You know, I don't know. I really think it's just the fact that you still can work with color, you can still work 2D, 3D, but you can work positive, negative right at the same time too. You know, plus the potter's wheel, once you kind of get that under your belt, it can be a really therapeutic.
Okay, this grouping of wall goddesses was created by Stephanie Miller Davis, who has a studio in Solon, and these are all raku fired. So from left to right, the first one is called Stargazer. The next one is Virgin Mary. The next one kind of has an Egyptian vibe, and it's called Hathor. We've got Pre-Columbian Goddess. And then her coloration changed a little bit. This next, after that, the piece that's a little bit more, that has the figure, the red figure with the wings, is called Ishtar. We have Hopi Maiden, a little Southwest influence. And then the piece on the end is called Nile River Goddess. And the difference with this piece is the plaque is raku fired, but the figure itself is that Sagar firing, and that's how she's able to get those subtleties in the colors and those reds. And I just love the contrast of that with the smoked background, and then you've got this shiny glaze of the trim of the frame around the figure. Okay, this shelf of this case was created by Michael F. Coles Sr. You know him as the Willoughby Potter. He's obviously from Willoughby, Ohio, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump from Lakeland. And he gave us a grouping of pieces that have, each one has been fired a little bit differently. From left to right, we have a blue Sagar fired pot, and then we have a horse-haired fired pot. Then next to it is an Abvara fired vase, the short little pit fired pot, and then the raku fired pot on the end, which has some lovely iridescence and opalescence to it. Okay, on this next shelf, these are 3 pieces created by Martin Huner, and he identifies these pieces by the glazes that he used to create them. So from left to right, it's Helen's Chino, the one in the back is Baron's Chino, and the one in the front right is called Orange Flash Chino. And then the piece in the center was created by Susan Gallagher. This is wood-fired. You saw her pieces in the Oak Hill kiln, but this was fired in a different kiln with different colors, and I just wanted to include it in the grouping because I love the organic shape, and then I love the application of the glaze on top. And then the final pieces on this shelf were 3 horsehair pieces created by Lynn Lofton. You saw some of her pieces before in the CIA train kiln where she had the sets of 4 cups on a tray. This is a piece by Molly Johnson. She fires with the Brinsley Tyrell Institute kiln in Freedom, Ohio, and this is a wood-fired sculpture. This next wall grouping was created by Chesterland artist Jenny Mendez. So, and there's a combination of different firing techniques. This first piece is called Big Face Cookie Jar, and it was soda fired. Then we have 3 wood-fired critters. She's got 2 cats with a lovely little frog in the center. And then this grouping of 5 square bowls, which she was kind of inspired by the faces of the Ukrainian soldiers. So these pieces, the title of the grouping are Ukrainian soldier bowls. And I tried to pick pieces that had, the most emotional and the most visual graphic impact of the visuals themselves. And then when she told me what these pieces signified, it kind of touched me a little bit deeper, knowing that she was trying to honor the soldiers that are fighting in the Ukraine. And then the next piece is a fun little figurative piece with little dried poppy pods. And again, look at those shadows, are so wonderful. And next to it, she's got a striped figure and then the figure with open arms. And at the very end, we have a giraffe, and the tail does swing a little bit, but I really don't, I'll leave that up to your imagination. Okay, this next grouping was created by Texas artist Chris Leonard. These are raku fired. The bottle on the left is called Solo y Yolo, One True Blue Boogie Bottle. And then we have a set of covered jars, and these are raku fired, and the title of these 2 pieces are Moody Blue, Tell Me Am I Getting Through, and The Old 1-2. Okay, this grouping was created by Gail Trunick, and not only is she a ceramic sculptor, but she also does assemblage art. So what she did on the piece on the left-hand side, which is called Lessons of the Past, is I believe that's probably the wheels from like a baby buggy or a little baby doll tram. And she's just incredible. The surfaces she creates and the emotion that she's able to incorporate into the sculptures and the colorants that she does in her studio. Oh my gosh, is incredible. It's so fun for me to go to the studio, see how the artists work, and see how they're how they create the pieces and what inspires them. The piece on the right is entitled Birth of a Culture, and you've got the bird with the crazy wings on the figure giving birth to culture. Okay, this last grouping to round out this collection was created by Jack Valentine. These are raku fired. He's got a black and white leveloured vase. The piece in the center is called the Trophy, and then we have red, yellow, funky vase. So what Jack does is he throws some of his pieces, he hand builds them, he puts them together as sculptures, and then fires them. And if you're familiar with the technique, when you see a piece that's this big, and the fact that he has to get it out of his kiln and put it into some kind of barrel or receptacle, so that you can fire it and reduce it, and so that the smoke can turn parts of the unglazed clay to the black smoky color, it's a technical feat, but it's also a physical feat. And then raku firing and wood firing is, it is very physically demanding, but it's like anything else, it's well worth all the effort that put into it to create these pieces. Well, that ends the tour for today. I hope you enjoyed me sharing the work with you of the 46 artists from 9 states who showed 290 pieces. I hope that you have a chance to come to the gallery and see the pieces up close and personal. Like I said, any of the pieces that are for sale will be available online. And again, the gallery hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Thank you so much for coming along, and thank you for letting me take your time and sharing with you one of my favorite media to display and curate in the gallery at Lakeland Community College. Thank you.